All right, so we've got a pretty interesting collection of articles here. It looks like we're going deep into the world of higher education today,
Yeah, it seems that way.
but not the usual, like, college ranking stuff, right?
Right, yeah, we're going a bit deeper than that. It looks like, this seems to be more about like the forces shaping education, not just for students, but for parents and universities themselves.
Exactly. Yeah, so we're talking about how colleges are fighting for their reputation online, the rise of vocational schools as a real alternative. Tennessee State University's plan to go completely solar. Plus, there's this fascinating look at how colleges are now using texting to connect with students.
Huh. It really is amazing to see how technology is changing higher education, impacting everything from how students choose a college to how they're supported once they're there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And here's a trend I'm kind of curious to unpack. There's this generational divide when it comes to vocational training. Guess who's more into it these days?
Well, judging by the articles you've gathered, I'd have to say it's the parents.
You got it right on the money. It seems parents are pushing vocational schools way more than their kids are. In fact, the data suggests that twice as many parents are considering vocational school for their kids compared to the kids themselves.
Wow, that's a pretty big difference. It seems like this parental push is coming from, worries about job security and wanting to protect their children from those huge student loans, which makes sense given, how the economy is right now.
Yeah, for sure it reflects the financial pressures families are under these days. But before we get too deep into the whole vocational school debate, I think it's worth looking at this obsession colleges seem to have with their image online.
It really is interesting, isn't it? It's like every university wants that five-star rating, just like restaurants on those review apps.
Like Yelp.
Yeah, exactly. Like Yelp and prospective students, they're poring over reviews and social media posts, looking at everything they can online before they even think about applying.
Makes you wonder if the traditional college rankings are becoming a thing of the past with all these real-time reviews and opinions floating around out there.
It's a good question for sure. The power dynamic is definitely shifting. Prospective students are taking control. They're relying on peer reviews and online communities to form their opinions.
And speaking of online narratives, Tennessee State University is making a pretty bold move with their sustainability plan. They're aiming to run their entire campus on solar power by 2030, which is a massive undertaking. Do you think it's a genuine commitment to the environment, or is there some savvy PR play going on here?
Probably a bit of both, to be honest. There's no denying the good PR that comes with going green like that. But, let's not be too cynical. The costs and logistics of switching to solar power are huge. It requires a serious investment of resources and planning. So this move does suggest that TSU is serious about reducing their environmental impact.
So you think this could become the norm for universities in the future? Are we going to see more and more schools putting sustainability front and center?
It's definitely a trend worth watching. Today's students are very aware of environmental issues, and they expect institutions to take real action. So universities that don't adapt to this shift risk losing potential applicants.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's not just about academic reputation anymore. It's about aligning with the values of future students. Now, let's switch gears a bit and talk about a problem a lot of students are facing right now, the internship crisis. The economy's led to all these hiring freezes, which means many students are graduating without any real-world work experience.
Yeah, it's a tough spot for those grads, for sure. Going into such a competitive job market without that experience puts them at a real disadvantage.
So what advice would you give to students who are having trouble finding internships and getting that work experience? How can they stand out and overcome this hurdle?
Well, first off, it's important to not get discouraged. It's easy to feel defeated when you get rejected, but you got to stay resilient and proactive. Instead of dwelling on what they don't have, they need to focus on their transferable skills.
Transferable skills, yeah, those are often overlooked, but super valuable.
Absolutely. Things like communication, problem solving, teamwork, adaptability. These are skills that can be used in any industry, any job, really.
So you're saying instead of just focusing on getting a traditional internship, maybe students could look at other ways to build their resume and get experience.
Exactly. Volunteering with organizations in their field, taking on freelance projects, heck, even starting their own little ventures. These can all show initiative, develop practical skills, and help them build a network.
Those are great suggestions. It's all about showing their passion and drive for their field, even if the usual paths are blocked right now.
Right. And while the job market's tough, there's also an opportunity here, for students to get creative and resourceful.
Now, let's talk about how colleges are using tech to connect with students. Seems like text messaging is the new frontier in student engagement.
It's really remarkable how fast texting has become like a core communication tool in higher ed. Colleges are using it for everything, sending personalized reminders, nudging students about deadlines, even running support groups through text.
It seems like a pretty effective way to reach students directly. cut through all the clutter of email and social media?
Absolutely. Younger people are used to instant communication, so texting fits right in with how they communicate, but there is a balance to strike here.
How so?
Well, some students might love those timely reminders and support, but others might find constant texts from their college a bit intrusive or overwhelming.
So where do we draw the line then between being supportive and being overbearing digitally? How can colleges make sure they're using texting in a way that helps students without adding to all the digital stress they're already dealing with?
That's a really important question. Transparency and choice are key here. Colleges need to be upfront about why they're using texting and explain to students what kind of messages they can expect to get. And they got to offer an easy way to opt out for students who don't want to be contacted that way.
Makes sense. You got to respect individual preferences and avoid that digital burnout, right?
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot and making sure technology improves the student experience, not makes it worse.
No, we can't ignore the big one here. Social media, platforms like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, even LinkedIn are facing more and more pressure to protect young users, and many of those users are prospective college students.
Yeah, it's a complicated issue. On the one hand, social media is incredibly valuable for universities to reach potential applicants. It's a direct line to young people to share info about programs and, build their brand.
But on the other hand, these platforms have been criticized for exposing young people to harmful content, promoting unrealistic beauty standards, and even, facilitating cyberbullying.
Yeah, that's a legitimate concern, and it's forcing universities to really think hard about their social media strategies. They need to strike that balance, between reaching their audience effectively and protecting young people from potential harm.
It sounds like they're walking a tightrope. How can universities navigate these ethical issues and still use social media successfully?
It takes a multi-pronged approach. First and foremost, they've got to be careful about what they're creating, and sharing it needs to be age-appropriate, informative, and engaging, but without resorting to, sensationalism or anything that could be harmful.
So it's about being responsible with their content.
Exactly. And it's not just about the content itself, it's about how they're using the platform's features, being aware of privacy settings, content filtering options, reporting mechanisms, making sure they're creating a safe and positive online environment.
Sounds like transparency is really important here too, right? Universities should be upfront with prospective students and their families about how they're using social media, what they're doing to protect minors.
Absolutely. Transparency builds trust. They need to clearly communicate their policies on social media, including data privacy and community standards. And they need to be responsive to concerns and questions, show that they're committed to open and honest communication.
So it seems like managing a university's social media presence these days comes with a lot of responsibility.
Oh, for sure. It's not just about posting fun stuff and getting likes anymore. It's about using these platforms ethically and responsibly, realizing the impact they have on young people.
Well said. It's a good reminder that social media, for all its good points, can also be a double-edged sword. Universities need to approach it carefully and with a strong sense of responsibility.
I agree.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here, but I think it's time to go a bit deeper into the details of these topics. You ready to continue our deep dive?
Absolutely. Let's unpack these issues further and see what we can discover together. It's interesting how all these things we've been talking about are kind of connected, like the focus on online reputation and the rise of vocational schools. They both seem tied to this uncertainty about the value of a traditional college degree.
That's a great point. I mean, college costs have gone through the roof, and so many students graduate with tons of debt. It's no surprise that parents and students are wondering if that four-year degree is still the golden ticket it used to be.
Especially when you have vocational schools saying, hey, we can get you job ready faster and cheaper. They're tapping into that anxiety and promising a quicker return on investment.
And then you add in online reviews and social media shaping student decisions. It creates this really complicated landscape for universities to navigate. They're being judged on so many levels, not just academics, but their online presence, their commitment to sustainability, whether they're actually teaching skills employers want.
It's a lot to handle, but I think this scrutiny is ultimately a good thing. It's pushing universities to step up their game, be more accountable to students and the job market.
I agree. It's definitely forcing them to innovate and adapt. Speaking of innovation, let's go back to Tennessee State University and their plan to go all solar. What are the big takeaways from their story?
Well, symbolically, it shows that higher education is starting to take sustainability seriously. TSU is making a statement saying we care about the environment, and that's likely to inspire other schools to follow suit.
So it sets a precedent, which is huge, but it also highlights the costs involved, right? Switching to solar power is a big investment, and universities need to weigh the long-term costs and benefits.
Absolutely. And there are technical challenges too. Integrating solar energy into their existing infrastructure isn't simple. It's not just about sticking panels on rooftops.
So it's not just the upfront cost of the panels. There's a whole infrastructure overhaul to consider.
Exactly, but despite those challenges, the potential payoff is big, both in terms of saving money on energy and, helping the environment. It's a really interesting case study, and it raises questions about how energy is going to be used in higher education going forward.
Yeah, it's a reminder that universities can be leaders in driving change, not just in education and research, but in tackling global issues like climate change.
Right on. Now let's dig a bit deeper into this whole texting thing. It's pretty new, but it's catching on fast.
It makes sense why colleges are using it, right? Texting is a direct and instant way to reach students, cut through all the noise of email and social media. It's how young people communicate these days. They're always on their phones.
Exactly. So it's smart for colleges to use that channel to share important info reminder support services. It allows for more personalized and accessible communication.
But like we said earlier, there's a fine line between being helpful and being too much. How can universities make sure they're texting in a way that benefits students without adding to their already busy digital lives?
You're right. They need to be careful about how often they text and what they're sending. Finding that balance is crucial. They also need to be upfront about why they're texting and give students the option to opt out if they want.
So transparency and choice are essential when it comes to any kind of communication, especially something as personal as texting. This does raise some interesting questions about how student-university relationships are changing.
Definitely, on the one hand, you have this increased accessibility and personalization, which can build stronger connections.
But on the other hand, there's the risk of being too intrusive, blurring the lines.
Exactly. It's a tricky balance that universities need to figure out.
Makes you wonder how these communication patterns will evolve as technology keeps changing. What new ways of communicating will we see, and how will they shape the future of higher education?
It's an exciting and unknown territory. Who knows what's coming next?
Speaking of uncharted territory, let's shift back to the job market and those challenges students are facing, particularly this internship crisis we talked about with all the hiring freezes. A lot of students are graduating without that essential work experience they need to start their careers.
It's tough. It really highlights how important it is for the grads to be adaptable and resourceful. They need to think outside the box and find other ways to gain skills and build their resumes.
Absolutely. What are some strategies you'd recommend for students in this situation?
Well, volunteering with organizations in their field is a great way to go. It gives them practical experience, lets them develop skills and make connections.
So it's a way to show they're committed and proactive even without a formal internship.
Exactly. Another option is freelancing. There are platforms that connect freelancers with clients looking for specific skills. It's a good way to get real-world experience, build a portfolio, and even make some money while they're looking for a full-time job.
Those are great tips. It's about taking charge of their career development, not just waiting for something to come along.
Exactly. And they shouldn't underestimate networking, going to industry events, connecting with people on LinkedIn, reaching out to alumni from their school. All of that can lead to unexpected opportunities.
So it's about building relationships and showing off their skills and passion. It's a tough job market, but it's not impossible.
Not at all. With the right attitude and a proactive approach, these graduates can turn a tough situation into a valuable learning experience. Now let's get back to social media and how universities are dealing with this whole issue of protecting minors online.
It's a real balancing act, right? On one hand, social media is crucial for reaching potential students, many of whom are underage. But on the other hand, these platforms are under fire for exposing young people to harmful stuff and, those addictive algorithms.
Yeah, it's a valid concern, and it's making universities rethink their approach to social media. They have to find a way to have a presence online to attract students, but also protect minors from potential harm. It's a tricky situation.
So what concrete steps can universities take to handle this challenge effectively?
Well, they have to be really careful about what they post and share, making sure it's age-appropriate, informative, and engaging, but without using any tactics that could be seen as exploitative or harmful.
So being responsible content creators.
Exactly. And it's not just about the content itself, it's about how they're using the platform's features too, being aware of privacy settings, content filtering, options, reporting mechanisms, all of that to create a safe and positive environment.
And transparency is key here too, right? Universities need to be upfront with prospective students and their families about their social media practices and how they're protecting minors.
Absolutely. Transparency builds trust. They need to clearly communicate their social media policies, data privacy guidelines, community standards, and they need to be responsive to any concerns or questions, showing that they're committed to open communication.
So it seems like managing a university's social media presence is a pretty big deal these days.
Oh, definitely. It's not just about posting fun stuff and getting likes anymore. It's about using these platforms ethically and responsibly, realizing the impact they can have on young people.
Well said. It's a good reminder that social media can be a double-edged sword. Universities need to be careful and take it seriously. It's kind of interesting how the lines are getting blurred between traditional college and vocational training. We've talked about how popular vocational schools are becoming, but it seems like universities are also changing what they offer to meet this demand for job-ready skills.
Yeah, you're right. It's not an either-or thing anymore. Lots of universities have added elements of vocational training to their degree programs. They're offering specialized certifications, partnering with companies to give students hands-on experience, and designing courses that are more aligned with what employers are looking for.
So it seems like universities are realizing they need to evolve to stay relevant and prepare students for this rapidly changing job market.
Exactly. They're seeing that students today want a more personalized and flexible education, one that gives them both a broad knowledge base and those practical skills they need to succeed in their careers.
Which brings us back to the huge role technology is playing in shaping the future of education. Online learning platforms, personalized texting, all that, it's changing how students learn, connect, and just navigate their whole academic journey.
It's creating some amazing opportunities for accessibility, flexibility, and customization. Students can learn at their own pace, take courses from anywhere in the world, tailor their education to their specific interests and goals.
It's pretty incredible how technology is breaking down those traditional barriers to education, but it also presents some challenges, right?
Definitely, there are concerns about digital equity. Not all students have equal access to technology and reliable internet, which can create a digital divide.
That's a really important point. And what about data privacy? With universities collecting so much data on student behavior and performance, how can we be sure that information is being used ethically and responsibly?
Those are valid concerns. And then there's the potential for technology to make education more fragmented and isolating. How do we make sure online learning encourages collaboration and community instead of just having students stuck behind their screens? These are all things educators and policymakers are wrestling with as technology becomes more and more integrated into higher education.
Sounds like finding that balance is key. We need to embrace the potential of technology to improve education, but also be aware of the potential downsides and take steps to address those.
I agree. Universities need to be thoughtful about how they use technology, always putting the needs of student first. It's not just about using the newest gadgets or software. It's about using technology to support real learning experiences and create a vibrant and inclusive community.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of higher education, what are some key takeaways you hope our listeners will walk away with?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that higher education is at a turning point technology, the economy changing, student expectations, social and environmental issues. It's all coming together to reshape the landscape in big ways. It's a time of great challenges, but also exciting possibilities.
It definitely feels that way. What advice would you give to students, parents, educators who are trying to navigate this complex and constantly changing world?
I'd say be adaptable, be open to learning new skills, exploring different paths, and challenging the way things have always been done. Being innovative and willing to embrace change is crucial for success in this new era of higher education.
And don't be afraid to ask questions, challenge assumptions, and speak up for what you believe in. The future of higher education isn't set in stone. It's being shaped by the decisions we make every day.
Well said. And remember, this deep dive is just the start of the conversation. We encourage you, our listener, to keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep talking about how we can shape education in a way that benefits everyone.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. We hope this deep dive has given you some valuable insights and a new perspective on the evolving world of higher education.